Hey, this is Christian Buckley, and this is another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here with Chris. We're going to go through and talk about a few things. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll jump into it.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Miller. I'm a software architect for Tyler Technologies. I'm based in Albany, New York. Been an MVP. It just was rewarded for my 6th year in a row.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was Visual Studio Development Technologies, but as of today, it's Development Technologies.
Yep.
And in my spare time, I run a local .NET user group called the Tech Valley .NET user group. It's been around for probably about 15, 20 years. I kind of inherited it when the former president moved to Florida. Every few years we run elections, but no one wants to do it but me. So,
and that's part of the story of being involved with user groups. But
yes, you broke it, you own it. But I have the advantage of my boss completely supporting it 100%. We're able to host it at our office building. We have meeting rooms big enough for the user group. We have an occasional sponsor. Usually my company will pick up the tab. We've kept it low key enough. We've never had to file for 502(c) or something.
Well, the 501c3, which allows, there's different kinds of nonprofit, and there's the regular nonprofit. The 501c3, it's a little bit tougher to get that, but that's where people can actually write you a check, and that is then, that donation can be accepted, and it's and they can write that off.
Okay. Every now and then, someone will try to donate money, and what I usually do is we're going to run as long as we can without a budget. So instead of bringing me money, bring someone new to the user group, or speak, or buy something we can give out as swag.
So that's another way that there's a lot. And actually, I don't know how familiar you are with like the SharePoint Saturday model, but when it started over 10 years ago, the sponsorships, there was no centralized pooling of funds. It was, okay, you're going to be a sponsor. You're going to go pay for T-shirts for everybody, and you're going to buy pizza for lunch. And so that's another way to simplify like a user group or a small event. And of course, then you rely on sponsors to kind of uphold their part of the agreement and show up and bring the lunch.
Yeah, that happened. Last December, I did a Xamarin Code Camp, and a third-party component vendor offered to sponsor it. And in fact, they reached out to me to do it. And the day of the event, I get this call from the local sub shop that was doing it, saying, "Oh, by the way, the credit card was refused." I'm like, "What credit card?" The credit card of the sponsor that you had? And of course, the swag showed up like 2 days after the event. So it was entertaining. But we run small enough, low enough under the radar where really haven't had corporate sponsorship. Excuse me. Our expenses are low. We have a meetup my boss pays for. Every now and then, if the swag pile gets too low, he'll give me the budget to go out and get some cards. Excuse me, I drink some water. I just swallowed something evil.
Yeah, no worries. That's a, and I worked for a company a few years back where they were very supportive of my community activities. And I did the same thing where they helped as I organized a number of big events out here on the West Coast. They basically did the accounting, like pulled in like the funds, sponsors and stuff, paid it to my former company. And so there's a tax burden there. There was, help in organizing all that and chasing down those payments and stuff. And in the meantime, the company said, well, we know we got the commitment. We've not received the funds yet, but go ahead. We'll reimburse you, Christian, for going and taking on these costs. And then we'll just, pay ourselves back here, which was, it's great when you have a company that does that. When you don't, the next company is that's where I went and started my own nonprofit, not a 501c3, but nonprofit, just to help fund these events that I was co-organizing.
Yeah, it's the other thing too. Albany is such a small area for user groups. It's really haven't had to spend a lot of money. I've been in places like Philadelphia where their user group is kind of like a full-time endeavor.
Yeah.
and
Where,
we just don't have that activity. You
well,
know,
this is, well, so I mean, so tell me, it's like, do you have like a board? I mean, how did you, that you inherited this group that's been around for a long time? And I know, like, I was familiar with the Bay.net group in the San Francisco East Bay. So I don't know where they're meeting now. It's been years since I've been in California, but they were meeting in Walnut Creek, and they were meeting in Concord for a while, and down into even Pleasanton and San Ramon at different areas for those that are East Bay people. But I mean, it was a huge user group. Some of the events that I went to, just the regular monthly events, and they'd have like 100, 150 people.
wow, that's good.
And it's been around for a long time. So your group, you inherited. Um,
Yeah, I'd been a member and had been helping out. And in fact, we were already at that point hosting it in my office because
See, that was the mistake. You helped.
yes. And then one day the president of the group went to lunch. He goes, I'm kind of moving to Florida next month. How would you like to take over the user group? So I said, all right, if we're going to do this, we'll do this the right way. We'll have elections, and no one else ran. And
But you have a committee? I mean, do you have a,
we had a committee. We had a formal committee, and everyone showed up for the first meeting.
Yeah.
And then they all disappeared. So at this point, we don't have anything formal. We have a loose committee of about 4 of us that take care of the duties. I probably have most of the responsibility for it. But I'm grooming this younger guy to eventually take it over, or at least, be available to run it when I'm not there.
Sure.
But, our typical meeting size is probably around 30.
Look, that's a great size. I mean, especially for a smaller area. What kind of topics? I mean, what's really getting people interested in coming out? What do you see right now? The kind of trends and topics.
Anything that's .core related gets people in. Unit testing brings people in. One of my coworkers did a session on using Appium for doing UI testing for Xamarin apps, and that got a good crowd. We found that anything involving UWP does not bring the people in. It was almost like the kiss of death. So we had to make sure we didn't go crazy with that stuff. We do like to show what's coming out, what's new, but big sessions on UWP and a Windows Phone session when it was still viable I'd get like 3 people.
Yeah, but it's really rough. Like how do you guys decide on topics? Do you poll your community?
We poll. We ask people what they want to do. Every now and then we'll just do a session that's just completely open for talk. People can bring whatever they want to talk about. If they're having projects they're stuck with, bring those in. A lot of times it's whatever the speaker wants to speak about. We have one coming up in October that'll be SQL Server based, because there's a woman in Vermont that's a really big SQL Server person, and she was coming out this way and said, I'd love to speak to your user group. I'm like, done.
Yeah.
And it's like whoever I can rope up. If I'm speaking at a code camp and there's someone that likes to come out, or even do remote. We've done a fair number of remote sessions, and they've worked pretty well.
Okay, I have mixed feelings about that because sometimes they've not gone very well.
I think it has a lot to do with the presenter. Last year we had 2 back-to-back, and the first one was perfect. The presenter, she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the strengths and limitations of being remote, and it worked very well. The second one, not so well. The presenter wasn't as well prepared, wasn't really used to speaking in front of a microphone and a camera, so she'd be zooming in and out. And so I try to help out. So I just let, I sit behind the camera and just if I see someone raising their hand, I'll signal the person speaking, because sometimes they, if they have lousy bandwidth, they're not going to have their camera going. They'll just have their screen going. So it varies.
Because that's really it's a big issue for a lot of user groups to say, well, you're polling your group to come up with topics. Of course, Microsoft has announcements all the time. There's a lot of things that happen. I have to expect, if you're developer focused, that after build with some of the announcements with the .NET Core and some of the other things that came out. I've done a couple of the MVP Buzz chats where we're talking about some of the announcements there, and there's so much that's happening around AI. I was at Build, so hey, I got a sweatshirt, but I mean, there's just a lot of interest around talks, the cognitive services, some exciting things that are happening there around automation. And I'm not as familiar with some of the developer tools areas, but you have those things. But the question always comes when you said people want to dial it in and to present, is like, you lose a lot of just the networking, the conversation that's in the room, because it's not just about, hey, somebody standing up and doing a topic for 30 to 60 minutes.
Yeah, I recently accepted an invitation to speak at a user group in Michigan, and I'm going to be very careful with how I do it, because you lose a lot of two-way communication. I'm going to reach out to the guy running the session and say, hey, however you want to signal me to speak up, I'll halt whatever I'm doing and show people.
Yeah,
it's a Xamarin session, and those kind of things where everything's screen-based lend itself very well. If I was doing an IoT session, oh no, forget it. You don't want to do those that way, because it's like, here I am holding up something blinking as opposed to having something on. It gets a little hard to do.
Yeah, it's you almost need to have. So if you got the video, you got the audio there, you need to have some other kind of interaction. That's why I like when you're doing a Zoom or GoToMeeting or Skype, and having the chat, on the side. And so people asking questions. I mean, it's tough when you're presenting and trying to get through, especially some meaty content, and monitoring also the questions and things if it's scrolling by. That's why I like the formal webinar software, because then it has each line item, the questions, you can open it and expand it,
exactly.
that kind of thing, or respond. But it also then lets you, by capturing that text-based allows you to go back and answer that. I always like to say, if you're going to do something like that, because I'm not against, having people remote present. I'll tell you, what I was going to say is, to finish that thought, is that, you almost need to do something extra. Like, you show up, you're doing that, but then I'd almost say, like, well, it'd be great if you could then do a blog post where you answer all these questions that were asked, the ones that you address.
Good. Make it really good follow-up.
Yeah, so I think that, there's a lot of value out of that. But what I was going to say is that, so with the Utah SharePoint user group, so I'm on the board. We had our president, Ryan Schouten, very dynamic guy, just earned his MVP, moving to San Diego. He's abandoned us. He went to work, cool job though. He went to work for Blizzard Entertainment down in Southern California. So he's very happy. Happy for him. But so the board is just kind of putting together and reorganizing, figuring out who's going to run it, the various parts. And we thought, here's a great way, a time for us to kind of reconstruct how we're going to run the user group. And we've come up with a couple ideas that we are very excited to get started on. I don't know if you've thought about this, like, because you're putting things together. You're organizing and making sure that the event is happening. It's all the operation side. Do you have somebody who owns like speakers topics and is driving that, or are you also doing that?
For the user group, I'm pretty much doing all of it.
Okay. Well, here's our idea. Get your feedback on this. So we've decided that we're going to split it into 3 different sections and rotate. So so basically what we're going to do is, every 3rd month, there will be a topic that is the deep dive technical, goes into whatever the announcements, and it's a deep dive into that specific topic. So guest speakers, more on the dev side, and really in depth on that. The next month, it will be, I don't know the order of them, but the second topic will be, since we're SharePoint, Office 365, and really Microsoft 365 field of workloads, and going through all in that last 90 days, all of the Office 365 updates and what they are, and like go through them. And because we had so many people asking about that. And so we've got that deep dive 1 topic, overview of all of the updates, just kind of the Microsoft list of things. And then the 3rd month is a business case more of an executive manager session where we're going to talk about business solutions and kind of like that topic. We're going to address multiple personas, but it was to take the application of the technology and make that a topic. And I don't know what that'll look like yet entirely. I think you understand the other two, but that one we have to look. But we have, like a lot of user groups, we have that split between end user and business users, and then the technical crowd. And so you're either satisfying one or not, and not the other, and you're going back and forth. And some user groups have split themselves and created two user groups. And I think my experience, we've tried that in two different areas, is we saw a drop in attendance of both. And so they ended up combining again. So we're going to give this a try.
That sounds interesting. We're in a slightly different situation because we're almost all technical. So we get mostly developers, but it's good to break it up. So you do a deep dive 1 month, you do like the open session I was talking about before, we're just, bring your problem in and we'll workshop it together.
Yep.
But it would be good to do like a session like every, a couple of times a year, like what's new and what's new on the tool side. Why should you be upgrading? What do you need to be concerned about? What's out there? Just like stuff like Google updating their Android emulator so it works with Hyper-V. I mean, if you're on the beta path with the Microsoft stack, you knew that already because there were beta versions of Visual Studio that supported it. But if you worked for a company that didn't allow you to have the beta tools, you were just using what was general release, that's kind of a big thing. If you're not allowed, if you need to have Hyper-V, like if you're doing container work, you're doing virtual machines, not being able to run the Android the full speed emulator is a big production issue, a big productivity issue.
Yep.
So yeah, I could easily see doing a session just on stuff like that.
Yeah, it's I don't know what the right answer. I'm sure there are others that are out there that are looking at there are participants within, members of, or on the boards of user groups, and they're trying different things. I'm always interested to hear what's working and not working for other groups. But I mean, we have the same issues. It's if you find that you are defaulting to the members of the committee presenting, and it's kind of last minute on a topic, you're not really, it's not a formal presentation. The problem with that is that you have people that may show up for the first time and they look around and they just kind of, is this it?
Right.
This is what we're doing? And we'll never return.
Exactly.
And so you've got to be careful of that.
We're always looking for ways to get the college students interested, because we have a couple of big engineering schools close by. Last spring, Microsoft had me take a bus of them to the Red Shirt tour in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So we left at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, picked up a boatload of students, and then picked up another bunch from the State University of Albany. And then we took the 3-hour trip to Boston.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was. Would have been cooler if the bus didn't break down twice, but it made it an adventure.
Well, you get all these brilliant RIT students there. I mean, they all should be able to get out and understand, how to, well, maybe that's just the theory of the engines.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Well, after they replaced the first bus, we're thinking, oh, we're home free. And then when the second bus completely died, and I called the Microsoft event organizers, they literally sent out a fleet of taxis to retrieve us off the Boston Turnpike.
Run a user group, have your bus broken down. That's what you're saying the experience will be.
Yeah. But they all got to meet Scott Guthrie at the very end.
Oh, that's very cool.
Which was cool. He was on a tight schedule, but he took the time to talk to each person individually and post for pictures. So they got that out of it.
That's cool. Well, that was the Scott Guthrie pity visit because of the bus. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Well, Chris, so how can people find out more about, certainly up in your area, but about the user group, and then about you? What's the best way to reach you?
Probably my blog. It's rajapet.com, RAJAPET.com. I'm also on Twitter as Another Lab. And in about a month or so, I'll have my first course out on Pluralsight, which will be how to do localization with Xamarin Forms.
Very cool. Local team, local company for me here. Yeah, it's they're one of our local the Utah Unicorns. So, but well, Chris, well, thanks a lot for your time, and of course, I'll have a blog summary of this. You can find that out on BuckleyPlanet.com, and I'll be promoting this out via social. So. Chris, keep in touch and let me know if anything, if you come up with any other winning ideas for making sure that your user group succeeds, let me know. I'll amend the blog post and add some of those
cool
guidance. So
more the merrier.
We need to I think as especially within the Microsoft ecosystem, we need to do a better job of sharing our best practices over practical things like this. Making sure that we're doing the most that we can to benefit the community and to bring the best experience to these communities.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
So,
cool.
All right. Well, Chris, well, thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, thank you.